You mentioned that you really started getting into politics 2007, 2008. What prompted you to get in? Was it like Obama's speeches at the time? Because I remember he was taking over. He was like the cool person back then. Was it your like or dislike of Bush? What made you like really, get into politics as a comedian?
Okay, so it was So I actually really liked George W. Bush right after September 11th when he came to New York City and he gave that bullhorn speech. Yes. If you guys have ever seen it,
legendary.
Where he goes, dude, when he said he goes to all of the people in New York, we hear you. And he said, like, we hear you and Washington, D.C. hears you. And pretty soon, the people who knock these towers down, they're going to hear from you as well.
Yeah.
And I was like, yo, I was 18 at the time. I was like, yo, that is my fucking president. I love this guy. I mean, I was so on board with like, oh, these motherfuckers hit us and they have no idea who they just hit. Like, we're the toughest killers in the history of the world. We're going to go get all these guys. So I was like totally on board at that point, but just a kid, like an idiot. I didn't know anything. And then fast forward to like, there was like a few years later, and it was after he had already invaded Iraq and we had been bogged down in Afghanistan for a while. And it was like, what? We're trying to overthrow the Taliban. And why are we fighting Saddam Hussein? And then there was one press conference where someone asked him, they were like, hey, it's been forever and you still haven't gotten Osama bin Laden. And, like, what's up with that? And he said, you guys go find this. It's been a long time since I watched this video, but I'm not far off. He said, essentially, like, I don't really care. It's not even something I think about. Like, I'm focused on other things.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing that and it was like, yo, I hope you fucking burn in hell, dude. Like, really, motherfucker, you came here after we got hit and promised us that you were going to go get these motherfuckers. And now you're telling me you don't even care, but you actually had some totally separate beef because like something with your dad being an attempted assassination or something like that is what I knew at the time, you know? And so then I was like, screw him. And I was rooting when the Democrats won the Congress back in 2006. And then when Barack Obama started running, I was like, oh, okay, this guy seems really smart and charismatic. And maybe he'll be kind of the next like JFK. And he's totally against the Bushes. And anyway, so then it was in 2007. I literally just happened to be watching the Republican presidential debate. And I saw it was the Ron Paul versus Rudy Giuliani moment. Do you guys know what that is?
No. This is 07. Because I'm trying to think here. Obama ran against McCain, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yes. Okay, so this is in the Republican primaries before McCain had won it.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Yep.
So this is the Republican primaries, and okay, so Rudy Giuliani had started that year's Republican primary as the front runner. Mm-hmm. And then ultimately he got knocked out and then McCain ended up winning the nomination. Yeah. But Ron Paul was running for president that year. So he was one of the guys on the debate stage and he was a libertarian, but a Republican, like in, Rand Paul's father and like a Thomas Massey, Rand Paul type, hardcore, but even more hardcore than them, like a hardcore libertarian, but who was a Republican in Texas.
Gotcha.
And so he gets up and he goes, and I really encourage you both and anyone in your audience to go watch this if you haven't already. And maybe for the younger guys, it might be even tough to understand how crazy this was in 2007. But so Ron Paul's up there. And at the time, the line was, they hate us because we're free. This was the George W. Bush line.
Yes.
That, hey, the reason these Muslims hate you is because you're so free and so rich that they just want to blow you up because they're possessed by evil or something. I don't know exactly what the logic was, but they just hate freedom and hate prosperity. So they want to kill you. Yeah. And so Ron Paul, this guy I'd never heard of before, he gets on stage and he goes, well, no. Listen, let me tell you something. The terrorists don't hate us because we're rich and we're free. They hate us because we're over there. They hate us because we're propping up, we're bombing Muslim countries, we're propping up brutal dictators in Muslim countries. Our sanctions are like starving their children to death. This is why they hate us. And he goes, now look, we're never, he said, I think his exact words were, he goes, if you think we can go around the world doing whatever we want with no risk to us, then we do that at our own peril. And so he's going off on this. And then Rudy Giuliani, to get back to why I don't like him so much, Rudy Giuliani interrupts him and he goes, you know, I think Ron Paul should apologize for what he just said. You know, I've heard a lot of ridiculous explanations for September 11th, and I've never heard anything like we were bombing Iraq and that's why 9/11 happened. I've never heard anything like that, which is, by the way, was in Osama bin Laden's, you know, letter to America, in his declaration of war against America. He specifically mentioned this. So Rudy Giuliani was just bragging about having never heard something that you probably should have heard if you know what the fuck you're talking about. Yep. And so he goes, okay, so he gets thunderous applause for calling Ron Paul out. And then he goes, I'd ask that Ron Paul apologize and tell us that he didn't really mean that. And then that gets thunderous applause. And then it goes back over to Ron Paul, and they're like, Ron Paul, would you like to apologize? And Ron Paul just goes, okay, I very sincerely believe that, you know how the CIA coined this term called blowback? Yeah. Yeah, that's a real thing. Blowback exists. And he just goes through this whole history lesson where he was like, look, you want to know why Iran hates us? It's because in 1953, our CIA overthrew their democratically elected government. That's why they hate us. Not because they're crazy Muslims, because we've been fucking with them. And went through this whole thing and whatever. As soon as it was done, I was just like, yo, who the fuck was that guy? Yeah. I've never heard anyone in the political sphere ever just say some real shit the way he did. And then it was just like, that was the spark. And then I was like, okay, I want to read his book. I want to, and then I just like fell down the rabbit hole and got obsessed with this stuff.
Wow. You know, and I really just, because I think it's very significant that he said that back then, because to question the war, to talk about geopolitical situations like this back then when we were in the middle of invading Iraq, etc., to question that back then was unprecedented and wildly, you know, ahead of its time.
Unheard of.
Now, right? I mean, I think people are just waking up to the Iraq situation like now, 2024, right? Decades after the fact. So for someone to call this out back then is crazy. And not let alone doing it on a national stage in front of everyone and saying, look, this is what it really is. And I think more Americans are waking up to this now. And it's interesting, right? Because obviously it's the anniversary of 9/11. And, you know, I remember when it first went down, you know, we were like, yeah, we're going to go after everybody. You know, this is Osama. This is the axis of evil, etc. Like, it was the most united time I've ever seen the United States. The whole bullhorn comment that you made, like people thought that was fucking awesome. He's like, you know, I hear you, America hears you, and the people that knock these towers down are going to hear all of us, right? And I remember the day when it happened, he addressed the country. And to this day, I still use that as an example whenever I tell guys like the definition of like controlling frame and, you know, being a leader. Mm-hmm. His address to the United States right after 9/11, I think was probably one of the best examples of leading during one of the most turbulent times in our nation's history.
But look, I mean... It also shows you, like, why is that so powerful? And I think that if you really understand that, in a weird way, it makes you understand Ron Paul's point. Yeah. You know, it's like, if you understand that, like, look, after 9/11, if an American leader stands up and goes, let me tell you something, I'm going to protect you from another 9/11 ever happening. And you know how we're going to do it? And maybe they don't say these exact words, but they go, we're going to go kill all these motherfuckers over there. You know, it's very easy to go, yes, fuck yeah. You know, and like, I think that There was something about that to me that it was always very easy for me to kind of understand that, like, you know, like, put yourself in the situation. If someone you loved got killed in front of you, it's not that hard to imagine that you'd be like, well, I want to go kill all of these guys. Yeah. Like, that's just, but then, okay, so extrapolate that out to like other conflicts. And then even just the same thing, it's like, okay, well, why do these Muslim terrorists want to come kill you? For the same reasons, for the exact same reasons, because some bomb blew up over there and their friend got killed. And they were like, well, I'm ready. And why is it that so many people in Israel after October 7th will want to go, but will support? I'm not talking about like the higher up political leaders. I'm just saying like a regular person will go, hell yeah, go flatten Gaza. Yeah. It's like, okay. And why is it that so many Palestinians are like, drive every single one of these into the sea? Because they've seen some shit happen to someone they love. Like, I'm not saying this isn't the final analysis. This doesn't justify any of these actions, but it's a pretty good starting point to at least go like, okay, I can understand why someone in that situation could get there pretty easily.
Yeah.
You know?